Good afternoon, everybody. I think we're about to start now. I just checked, Bridget. I'm coming over now on the.
Perfect. Go ahead, Nick. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to what is now the opening event for Clean Energy Week. We're focused this afternoon on engaging young policy leaders in the energy transition here in Cambodia. It's really good to see lots of people joining. We, of course, needed to respect the need for more caution at the moment to prevent COVID transmission. So we had to make some changes to our agenda and move some events online. So let me start off with a very big thanks to the Energy Behind Energy Week. That's, of course, Bridget McIntosh, the Country Director of Energy Lab. Thank you, Bridget. Great working with you on this again. We're joined by our equally dynamic Senior Energy Analyst for UNDP, Butch Gade. And both of them will be speaking to you a little bit later, and we'll have a chance to interact as well. I want to say thank you both to Bridget, to Butch, and to Energy Lab and UNDP teams and others who have helped curate a really strong program for Energy Week and a great event for us this afternoon. I'm really pleased to see young policy leaders interested and willing to engage on the issues of the future of energy. Now, if energy was a little bit of an academic, a bit of a dry subject some years ago, it certainly isn't now. It's a very dynamic issue. It's changing very quickly. It involves a lot of the latest and most exciting technology, and it's really changing everything from our economy, the way we interact, the way that we live. There's lots of potentials if we can get this transition right. Energy has been, up to now, also a source of a lot of problems, a lot of environmental problems. You know, dams on rivers, its effects on fisheries, and its effects on biodiversity. Coal-fired power stations' effects on pollution, air quality, on our health, on our well-being, and the impact, of course, on climate change, the climate crisis and global warming. But there's good news, and the good news is that the cost reductions in solar and in wind energy, and also in the new and emerging field of battery storage and new technologies in grid operations, energy is not only clean, not only safer, not only works better for us, but it's actually cheaper too. There's a strong economic argument about why we need to make this clean energy transmission. So it's moving away from this old model of a hub and spokes, this centralized power plant, and then near to where the ports were, where the coal was imported. And now we're able to create decentralized local grids, decentralized grids that can bring on much more renewable energy and energy where it's needed, making it more efficient, making it more effective. And one small example, we like to try to lead by example in the UN, well, at least on a good day. We have on our roof in UNDP solar panels, and we installed these about a year ago, so that much of the energy that we need to run our office is now clean and renewable. We invested in electric bikes, and 3 of them so far, which are very popular with our staff. We bought an electric vehicle earlier this year as well. So now much of our transport in Phnom Penh is completely zero emission. It's completely clean in terms of its energy and its emissions. And I'm hoping that towards the end of the year, all of our vehicle fleet, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, will be electric. We can drive our electric vehicles now up to Siem Reap. There are charging stations now available, and we can come back. We can do field missions in between as well. It's really very fast change in this in the technology. We work very closely with the government. We work with the National Council for Sustainable Development, the Ministry of Environment, of course, but also with mines and energy, with economy and finance, and across government, because this is an issue that affects all parts of government. Now, we have been doing work on the economic opportunity of solar energy, and Butch will say more about this when it gets to his part. How we can de-risk renewable energy investments, making them more attractive to private sector. The benefits of micro solar power as well. Don't forget, that means that communities that have been without reliable power sources, now we can get them a good source of power. And that can be a real transformation in the way that people live their lives, particularly in remote areas. Building standards is another opportunity for us to be much more efficient. This helps our economy as well as it helps our environment. I mean, I think you could sum it up by saying that for a country like Cambodia, a fast-growing middle-income country, the opportunity is to leapfrog ahead in a transition that maybe higher-income countries took a longer time to get to. And that leapfrogging can bring us to this decentralized grid, to a decentralized clean energy system, with all the benefits that that can bring in terms of our economy, in terms of our health, and in terms of climate change and our environment. Okay, so with those few words of welcome to everybody, let me introduce the structure of today's webinar. So first of all, we will have Bridget McIntosh, Country Director of Energy Lab, and she will be sharing with you global and regional trends in clean energy and policy development. We were going to have Morten Garman with us from 3IA, and unfortunately Morten wasn't able to join us. But of course, we're very glad to have our Senior Energy Policy Advisor, Butch Gade. And Butch is going to be sharing some of the experiences of evidence-based policy making and the work that he's been doing with the Royal Government. And then I think most importantly, after that, we have a chance for you to speak. So you might have questions, you might have concerns and points that you wish to raise. And we really do encourage you, please, this is what this session is all about. So you can ask us difficult questions, or you can raise interesting points. And we're keen to hear, listen, and learn with you. So with those few words, I'd like to hand over now to Bridget. Bridget, the floor is yours. Bridget, I think you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Nick. And welcome everybody to the webinar, our first webinar for Clean Energy Week Cambodia 2020. My name is Bridget McIntosh, and as Nick mentioned, I am the Country Director for Energy Lab Cambodia. Energy Lab has designed Clean Energy Week as a way of celebrating the opportunities clean energy can bring for Cambodia, lowering electricity prices, creating more jobs, encouraging investment, and helping Cambodia achieve energy independence. Okay, so the intentions of the webinar is to share with you what opportunities clean energy brings for Cambodia and the regional and global policies to enable countries to take advantage of clean energy, and then share work and research that's being undertaken to support Cambodia towards clean energy. Okay, just before we start, I just want to very quickly explain what clean energy is. So bioenergy, such as using agriculture energy waste or gas from animal waste, wind electricity, hydropower that is sustainable and run of river, and solar power. But let's also not forget that energy efficiency is also a very important aspect of clean energy. It's actually much cheaper and easier if we don't use energy as much as creating a new amount of electricity from solar or wind or a coal-fired power station, or smart energy, using technology to enable and manage and optimize supply and demand. And as we knew last year from the blackouts, Cambodia is hungry for energy, although COVID this year has slowed that growth. And you can see here on the graph how that very rapid growth over time has actually slowed in 2020. And we also have to remember that it's not all about electricity. Energy in Cambodia is used for transport, for industry, and wood fuel in factories. And actually 40% of all energy used in Cambodia is actually sourced from biomass. All right, so the benefits of clean energy. So first of all, it's cheaper. It's cleaner, more environmentally sound. It supports economic growth. It supports local jobs. It's faster to build, it's more reliable, and it results in investment and energy independence for Cambodia. So I wanted to share this video with you, made by our fabulous Pao Kun Ut at Energy Lab.
អ្នកប្រហែលជាមិនបានដឹងទេនៅកំណើននៃធម្មពលស្អាតធម្មពលស្អាតត្រូវបានកសាងក្នុង
Sorry. I'm good with technical difficulties here.
អ្នកប្រហែលជាមិនបានដឹងទេនៅកំណើននៃធម្មពលស្អាតធម្មពលស្អាតត្រូវបានកសាងក្នុងល្បឿនមួយដ៏លឿនជាងពេលណាៗទាំងអស់នៅក្នុងពិភពលោកនេះមិនមែនគឺជារឿងដែលគួរភ្ញាក់ផ្អើលនោះទេពីព្រោះថាតម្លៃនៃធម្មពលស្អាតកំពុងតែធ្លាក់ចុះហើយវិនិយោគិនកំពុងតែសម្លឹងឃើញនៅឱកាសល្អៗដែលធម្មពលស្អាតកំពុងតែផ្ដល់ឲ្យហើយនេះយើងមិនต้องបានរកបញ្ចូលនៅផលវិបត្តិផ្សេងៗនៃឥន្ធនៈ fossil ផងដែលវាកំពុងធ្វើឲ្យពិភពលោករបស់យើងក្តៅជាងមុនធ្វើឲ្យគ្រោះធម្មជាតិកាន់តែធ្ងន់ធ្ងរធ្វើឲ្យពិបាកក្នុងការធ្វើកសិកម្មធ្វើឲ្យពិបាកក្នុងការធ្វើដំណើរនិងធ្វើឲ្យពិបាកក្នុងការរស់នៅរបស់ប្រជាជនក្នុងពេលបច្ចុប្បន្នយើងដឹងហើយថាធម្មពលស្អាតគឺមិនល្អឥតខ្ចោះនោះទេព្រោះថាព្រះអាទិត្យមិនចេះតែចែងចាំងគ្រប់ពេលហើយខ្យល់ក៏មិនបក់រហូតគ្រប់ពេលដែរប៉ុន្តែប្រទេសកម្ពុជាស្ថិតក្នុងជំហរមួយដ៏ល្អប្រសើរក្នុងដំណោះស្រាយបញ្ហាប្រឈមទាំងអស់នេះយើងមានទំនប់វារីអគ្គិសនីធំជាច្រើនដែលអាចដើរតួជាអាគុយដើម្បីផ្ដល់ថាមពលដល់ទីក្រុងរបស់យើងនៅពេលដែលមិនមានពន្លឺព្រះអាទិត្យនិងខ្យល់បក់លើពីនេះទៅទៀតសប្តាហ៍ថ្ងៃនេះយើងក៏មានបច្ចេកវិទ្យាផ្សេងដែលអាចជួយយើងឲ្យយកឈ្នះលើបញ្ហាទាំងអស់នេះឧទាហរណ៍ឧបករណ៍ដូចជាអាគុយកុំព្យូទ័រឆ្លាតវៃឧបករណ៍គ្រប់គ្រងពីចម្ងាយនិងយានយន្តអគ្គិសនីប្រសិនបើយើងប្រើប្រាស់ឧបករណ៍ទាំងអស់នេះយើងនឹងមានការពប់កអគ្គិសនីដែលរឹងមាំជាងមុនដែលធ្វើឲ្យយើងមានសមត្ថភាពក្នុងការផ្ដល់ថាមពលដល់ប្រទេសកម្ពុជាទាំងមូលដែលមិនពឹងផ្អែកលើប្រទេសផ្សេងទៀតបច្ចុប្បន្នប្រទេសកម្ពុជាបាននិងកំពុងតែបង្កើតផែនការសម្រាប់អនាគតនៃថាមពលរបស់ខ្លួនផងដែរក៏ប៉ុន្តែរហូតមកដល់ពេលនេះផែនការរបស់យើងនៅមិនទាន់បានអនុវត្តតាមនិន្នាការរបស់ពិភពលោកទាំងមូលនោះទេយ៉ាងណាមិញយើងនៅតែមានសង្ឃឹមផែនការអាចផ្លាស់ប្ដូរបានហើយយើងក៏មានសមត្ថភាពក្នុងការធ្វើអ្វីដែលយើងធ្លាប់គិតថាយើងមិនអាចធ្វើបានកាលពីឆ្នាំ2004បណ្ដាញអគ្គិសនីប្រទេសកម្ពុជាត្រូវបានគ្របដណ្ដប់ដោយឥន្ធនៈ fossil ប៉ុន្តែវាត្រូវបានផ្លាស់ប្ដូរទាំងស្រុងនៅឆ្នាំ2014នៅក្នុងឆ្នាំ2016ប្រទេសវៀតណាមគ្មានពន្លឺព្រះអាទិត្យទាល់តែសោះប៉ុន្តែនៅពេលកណ្ដាលឆ្នាំ2020ពួកគេបានដំឡើងថាមពលពន្លឺព្រះអាទិត្យរហូតទៅដល់5 GW ប្រទេសកម្ពុជាមានអាកាសដ៏ធំធេងនាពេលបច្ចុប្បន្ននេះយើងអាចដំឡើងថាមពលសូឡានិងថាមពលខ្យល់កាន់តែច្រើនបង្កើនការផ្ទុកថាមពលឲ្យកាន់តែច្រើននិងធ្វើឲ្យបណ្ដាញបញ្ជូនអគ្គិសនីរបស់យើងកាន់តែឆ្លាតវៃវានោះមិននៅការងារល្អនិងថ្មីជាច្រើនចលរបស់យើងនឹងស្អាតជាងមុនបើយើងស្រមៃមើលថាអគ្គិសនីរបស់ប្រទេសកម្ពុជាមិនងាយដាច់វាកាន់តែល្អសម្រាប់សុខភាពហើយតម្លៃកាន់តែថោកជាងមុនតើអ្នកចង់បានអ្វីសម្រាប់អនាគតប្រទេសកម្ពុជាចូលរួមជាមួយយើងនៅសប្តាហ៍ធម្មពលស្អាតនិងស្វែងយល់បន្ថែមតាមគេហទំព័ររបស់យើង
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. I love how Kun very clearly explains the opportunity and the potential for clean energy in Cambodia. So with this presentation, I would like to share with you some of the global trends and regional trends in clean energy, a little bit of a recap that was part of that presentation, and then look at what's happening in Cambodia and look at some of the work that's been done to guide the policymakers, and then look at ways that more clean energy can be supported in Cambodia. So the global trends for clean energy is driven by the massively incredible cost reductions for particularly solar, the pale yellow line, and wind power in the last decade. And those costs continue to decline. And the cost for storage and batteries is also incredibly dropping fast, and batteries become an enabling technology for solar and wind because they are variable. And that means that batteries can manage the system and support the system when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. So as a result of those rapid cost declines, the Bloomberg New Energy Finance and the International Energy Agency predict that by 2050, more than half of all global electricity will be produced from solar and wind. And when you include the existing hydro projects that are built, that means that 69% of all electricity globally will be produced from renewable energy. So you can see in 2019, solar and wind actually had quite a small share of renewable energy. And over the next 50 years, that growth will be quite phenomenal. So you can see here the trend is away from fossil fuels. So in 2018, the small section in the middle, the globe was at 60% fossil fuels, so coal and natural gas, and only 29% from renewable energy. By 2030, that will shift so that 43% will come from renewable energy and 48%, so just less than half, will come from coal and gas. And then by 2050, it will have completely reversed out so that 69% of all electricity produced in the world will come from renewable sources. So how is that translating regionally? So in the region, we have a lot of countries embracing renewable energy and establishing targets towards more renewable energy. Vietnam is looking to have 21% renewable energy by 2030, Thailand 30% by 2030, and Myanmar actually will have 46%, including large hydro, which is quite a phenomenal change from where they were when they opened up just 4 or 5 years ago. So how about clean energy in Cambodia? So at the moment, in 2019, statistics from the electricity, 1% of all electricity generated in Cambodia was from coal and oil, and just 2% was generated, 55% of it came from hydropower. Based on projections from the EDC, the Electricity du Cambodge, Cambodia is set to have 80% of its electricity coming from coal and gas by 2030. So it's almost a complete opposite of where it was in 2018. And it's quite different to the global trend where globally renewable energy was 29% and then flipping it right out to 64%. So Cambodia actually has made terrific progress for new solar projects in Cambodia. Since the blackouts in 2019, new solar projects were approved, and many of them that were meant to come online this year, next year and the year after have almost all come online already. They're very fast to build. There is a wind power project that has been approved, but it has not yet signed a contract to sell its electricity to EDC yet. And just briefly, just to let you know the organisations that are involved in clean energy in Cambodia. So in terms of the power sector structure, you have the Electricity Authority of Cambodia, who is the regulator. You have the Ministry of Mines and Energy, which is the policy maker, and the Ministry of Economy and Finance with the Ministry of Mines and Energy are both the owner of EDC, Electricity du Cambodge, who is the utility that supplies and purchases electricity and then distributes it through its network to customers. There are also a lot of REE, rural energy enterprises, across Cambodia in rural areas. There are over 300 REEs that supply electricity to householders. They own their own electricity grid, they buy the electricity from EDC and they sell it to the customers. And you also have independent power producers. So those IPPs are companies that produce electricity and sell it to EDC. So some of them are solar, some of them are coal, some of them are hydro. We also have many clean energy companies in Cambodia. These are some of the solar companies and wind companies. And there are also companies in Cambodia that are manufacturing and exporting products such as H&M or Decathlon or Nike. And those businesses actually have targets to their international customers that they will have 100% of their electricity from renewable energy. And many of these businesses will find it more difficult to stay in Cambodia as the grid becomes more carbon intensive from more coal and more gas. At the moment, Cambodia is actually in a very good position with just under half of its electricity from renewable energy. But as more coal projects come online, the carbon intensity of the grid will increase, and it will mean that these companies will have to find other ways to meet their renewable energy targets. Okay, so with a rapid decline in costs in solar and wind, and with countries like my country, Australia, leading the way in establishing how to integrate variable renewable energy, Cambodia has an incredible opportunity to support more investment, to retain those industries like H&M and Adidas, create sustainable jobs, lower electricity prices, and help Cambodia to become energy independent, so less imports, and of course, help reduce impact on the environment. So, if those are the benefits of clean energy, and if Cambodia is well set up to take advantage of it, what is some of the work that's being done to help guide the policy making around clean energy? So there are very many development partners that are supporting clean energy in Cambodia, ADB, UNDP, AFD, 3I, JICA, the Australian Embassy. And I have compiled all the different research and analysis and projects that are working to support the government of Cambodia to incorporate more renewable energy. Now, this is quite an overwhelming slide, but essentially on the left-hand side here, this is research and analysis going towards supporting the grid to become more modern and able to take up more renewable energy, and also the power development planning. So the ADB is supporting the Ministry of Mines and Energy to develop a plan out to 2040, and a Japanese company helped them develop the plan out to 2030. In terms of broad renewable energy work that is being undertaken, 3I, Investing in Infrastructure, is working with the Ministry of Mines and Energy, EDC, EAC, to develop a renewable energy master plan. UNDP worked with the National Council for Sustainable Development to de-risk investments in renewable energy through that analysis. And the ASEAN also developed a renewable energy assessment in Cambodia. In terms of solar and wind energy, UNDP have undertaken the full economic appraisal of solar PV in Cambodia, and Butch will touch on that briefly. The ADB in 2017 also prepared a solar energy master plan where they looked at how much solar power could be incorporated into the grid before at different phases of low, medium and high to establish when there might be technical problems from more solar power on the grid. 3i has also conducted a solar farm energy potential assessment, identifying that there is significant potential for solar power in Cambodia. And in fact, Cambodia has some of the best solar irradiance levels in Southeast Asia. And 3i also undertook a wind energy potential assessment. And this was quite interesting because there used to be a myth that Cambodia did not have good wind potential. But with the proper monitoring equipment that has actually been undertaken by the Blue Circle at the correct height, it's been established that Cambodia has around 6 gigawatts of very good, high quality wind power potential. And then 3i has also looked at the rooftop solar potential in Cambodia. And last but not least, energy efficiency. So the ADB and the Ministry of Mines and Energy, and supported from UNDP, are undertaking a lot of work around supporting the government towards a national energy efficiency policy. And this includes things like standards and labelling and minimum performance standards. So basically sort of saying you can't sell, for example, a fridge or an air conditioning unit that is too inefficient and guzzling too much power. So if you have a minimum standard that aircon units must comply, then it just helps to improve the fleet of all equipment in Cambodia. UNDP and JICA and 3i are also working around building codes and regulations so that buildings are built correctly from the beginning. So, in terms of policy options to support clean energy in Cambodia, generally the Renewable Energy Agency has a framework for looking at policies. So essentially there are enabling policies, direct policies, or integrating policies. So for example, enabling policies are things like a renewable energy strategy, like a roadmap, or making sure that the power development plan clearly states how much renewable energy is planned for the country. But it's also things like employment policies, making sure that there is a good, solid workforce to install and manage renewable energy. And I think resource mapping, where the potential for wind power is, so that each company don't have to invest, you know, the $50,000 to $100,000 per met mast, and that data is available so that there is less time spent in identifying the right sites. And also looking at planning and land use issues and renewable energy zones. So then direct policies include things like renewable energy targets, so specific targets for how much renewable energy will be accepted into the grid at certain periods of time, or tariffs, for example, feed-in tariffs, where there is a set price that the government agrees to take on. Also investment and tax incentives. And actually the government is looking through the new investment law at specific incentives for renewable energy projects. And there are also commercial instruments such as corporate PPAs. So for example, if H&M can't install a rooftop solar system to produce as much as they consume at the factory, then they could buy electricity from a wind farm or a solar farm and attribute that electricity towards their consumption. It could also be solar power purchase agreements, where an investor owns the solar system on a roof and then they sell electricity to the customer. Or finally, making sure that power purchase agreements with, for example, a coal-fired power station has flexibility so it can ramp up and ramp down depending on when there is a lot of solar or wind output. And finally, integrating policies are things that really relate to the operation of the grid and the technical details. So integrated network planning or system infrastructure, making sure there's enough storage on the grid, and also then looking at grid access and planning so that the right projects go in the right area of the grid. So just briefly, I have 2 more slides and then I will pass over to Butch. I just wanted to share with you what's happening in Vietnam in terms of some of the renewable energy policies. So the enabling policies, the government has a renewable energy policy to target 21% by 2030, and they're releasing their power development plan early next year, and they have already signalled that they will be shutting down a significant amount of coal projects that were approved but have not yet gone ahead, and actually cancelling those projects and giving priority to renewable energy. But also some of the other policies they have, so direct policies. So they offer a feed-in tariff for solar and wind farms. So anyone wanting to develop a solar project knows exactly how much they will be paid from EVN for their project, which means that they can have certainty for their investors to go ahead. They also have a rooftop solar feed-in tariff. Factories can install up to 1 megawatt and they know exactly what price they will get for it. And they're also developing a corporate PPA structure so that factories like H&M can buy directly from a renewable energy project. And finally, in Thailand, they also have a renewable energy policy and then have some direct policies such as a feed-in tariff for solar, wind, biomass and hydro. And in fact, they've had those feed-in tariffs since 2006 or possibly even earlier. 2 years ago, they made a commitment to put solar on all their hydroelectricity dams. They have a rooftop solar program and also tax incentives, model power purchase agreements, and setting up or allowing blockchain peer-to-peer trading for renewable energy. So in conclusion, we have a trend because of the cost reductions globally of the electricity sector moving away from carbon-intensive fossil fuels and moving towards more renewable energy, particularly solar and wind. Cambodia is moving in the opposite direction, but we're not sure yet how it will pan out. We understand from EDC that they are very keen to incorporate as much solar power as possible within their grid. And with the support of development partners such as UNDP, 3I, the Australian government, AFD, ADB, there is a really strong and positive opportunity for Cambodia to take advantage of clean energy in Cambodia. So that is the end of my presentation. I wanted to give the floor now to Butch from UNDP to share from the coalface of a policy unit supporting clean energy in Cambodia. Thank you very much, and over to you, Butch.
Thank you very much, Bridget, for a very nice presentation. And thank you very much, Nick, for opening remarks and highlighting some of the flaggers here. This brings me which direction we will move. Globally, increase share of renewables, but seems to be, at least for 2030, things are not looking right. So could we turn this one to 2050 in another direction? Yes, it is possible. Engaging youth young policy leaders, and our experience in supporting this evidence-based policy development is challenging. It is challenging not only to the context of Cambodia, but across the countries in strengthening the role of evidence-based balancing factor in policy-making process. But this is doable. As much as challenging it is doable, and we enjoy doing it. In fact, provided we remain focused, stay engaged, and don't give up. There are denials, there are two sides of the coin all the time we will be challenged with. One would believe in what we are doing, what is possible. The other is keep denying it. We need to find a mid-ground and balance and how we went about this one. And still we have been, it's a challenging area we are trying to address mainly through our policy work. The first one is with regard to the evidence in various forms, both qualitative and quantitative, which is very much needed. Mainly for denial section of the policies, like pushing somewhat more greener, more cleaner, and power sector is challenged with various types of stakeholders here. In this scenario, it's important that we have a very quantitative and qualitative based evidence. In terms of quantitative, we have data, statistics, numbers, macroeconomics, and demographic statistics, and energy consumption demand patterns, which really informs the policymakers. And these are really paint a picture which direction we should move. In terms of the qualitative, we have to remain engaged with various stakeholders. This is exactly what we have done. In this particular work that we have done, what was mentioned in solar economics of solar work, we have been engaged in digging the data and in terms of the quantitative information. At the same time, we have been engaged in qualitative data collection as well, consultative meetings. And it is from past almost 1.5 years, we have conducted about 4 technical working group sessions. This really informed the policymakers as well, and dialogue and discussion and shaping. The second important thing is integrating evidence into policy making, but using evidence as an appropriate and transparent manner. I use the word appropriate because in a given context, it must have worked in, like for example, as Bridget mentioned, feed-in tariff worked very well in Vietnam. And can we implement the same thing here in Cambodia? Maybe, may not be. We need to look at what kind of options, what kind of structure we are working with, and what is possible within that given scope of work. This is quite an important one. Quite often, try to push from the evidence base, and it worked in elsewhere, it may work in the country, but here, what we try to pitch in this particular one is auction mechanism. This is one which was practiced. This is ongoing work, and which is the country and the system is very well aware of. And by engaging in this type of instruments, we can gain an extra mile than introducing feed-in tariff right away. In the structure, it is simply not possible. The third important thing which we would like to mention from our own experience of driving the policies in Cambodia, evidence-based policy making requires concerted effort and engagement of stakeholders from both policymakers, producers of the evidence, as well as across various sectors. And this is one of the key for making a breakthrough. This is the part of the qualitative data analysis and assessment. Sometimes it is time consuming, but nonetheless, it is quite an important process that we need to go through to make the various stakeholders to come to the same table and same level of understanding. The fourth important thing is harmonizing with other policy frameworks. Whatever we are going to recommend, it must fit into the framework. For example, power sector policies and energy sector mainly linked with rectangular strategy for nationally determined contributions, countries, Cambodia sustainable development goals. So all this, whatever the recommendation that we are going to do or with the evidence that we are making must fit within the framework or the scope of these policies as well and targets that drives the agenda forward. Fifth and the last point I would like to mention is a strong political will and leadership is quite important. We can't emphasize the importance of it. We may be doing a best of the best policies, but we are not the drafter is not the one who is going to make the policy. Policy makers are going to take a choice. When we put forth the instruments to the table, it is a choice of the policymaker to pick up the right choice for them. But we have to have a strong leadership, means political engagement from the beginning of the work. Otherwise, this work is not going to be flying in. So this is quite an important one. We try to remain engaged, various stakeholders, and there are very powerful stakeholders as well in this whole entire exercise that giving quite a push for a change that is required. And there are options, there are changes possible within the system. So evidence-based policy making in energy sector is imperfect in nature. Sometimes we find it, are we heading in the right direction? Or do we have to change it? Or the partners with whom we are working with? So it touches upon economic, social, environmental, and many other important key areas. For example, in the very report of this economics of solar, we went deep into doing a circular economy model using the input-output table of the country and to look into the how the improved or increased share of solar is going to have an impact onto the GDP. This is quite substantial. Sometimes we may have to deep dive into some of these sectors to look at what is possible, how this is going to have an impact at economy-wide impacts. So these are the quite important 5 key elements that I would like to mention to you. And I will stop here. Back to you, Nick.
Okay, I wasn't sure it was going to come back to me, but that's good. So, and I think, Bridget, it's now time for us to open up for questions. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Nick. So we have 3 questions online at the moment. Nick, I believe one of them might be for you. I'm going to split this into 2. So the first question comes from Jason at the Khmer Times.
Yeah.
He said, now more than ever, we are wanting our younger generation to be sustainable and smart with energy. Do you think there is enough being done in Cambodia in terms of education across the board in both schools and universities? And how could it be improved?
Okay, great. Jason, good question, because I think, you know, and really at the heart of what we're doing now, right, when we're engaging with younger policy makers, but also how do we engage with younger generations through education in general. And actually, I think there's some really interesting work being done in Cambodia right now. I mean, Minister Sai Samal, Minister of Environment, has really made reaching out through education and his cooperation with the Ministry of Education a cornerstone of his approach to, you know, how the environment can be preserved, climate change addressed, and so on, you know, including in the green energy transition. from UNDP side, we've been very keen to support that. So, you know, we have programs with the Cambodia Climate Change Alliance. We have a circular economy program as well. And one of the things we've done and we did this as a partnership with UNESCO, because we're not experts on education, but they are. And this is where you need to get these you need to get these collaborations of experts, and you need to get it right. And it was looking at primary school and primary school education, and they wanted to bring in, the government wanted to bring in, and in fact it was His Excellency Dr. Naron who wanted to bring in this at a young age, you know, to understand more about the natural world, to appreciate it, but also to get a sense of love and enjoyment and value to this, so that it's not just about education on facts and figures. It's also a transition in terms of an attitude, a state of mind. And what the Ministry of Education came up with, you know, with UNESCO and a little bit of support from us, is this idea of learning outside of the classroom, you know, because that's where the environment is, right? And doing things with the community, you know, for example, some cleanup work with the community, you know, some conservation work on maybe, you know, tree planting or so on. And so the idea is then, and it's a program they started with 10 eco schools and these eco clubs, that every Thursday afternoon, the school kids will be outside of the class. They'll be taking part in activities where they do learn, but they also actively participate in work and learning around the environment, around climate change, clean energy, and so on. And I think this is a really, really smart way to make it, you know, engaging. And, you know, you want to appeal to the heart as well as to the head, you know, and that's, I think, where you actually, in terms of education and, you know, you really make a transition. There's a little bit more. It's also on the secondary, in secondary education, it's a little bit more formal. They've actually made part of the curriculum on natural history. And I think that's really important as well. You know, actually learning a little bit of the solid science behind the natural history is also another great way to have an appreciation for it. You know, we've also done a clean energy grant with the Institute of Technology in Cambodia, you know, around about energy efficiency. You know, how do you make your building energy efficient? And they thought, well, we'll start with our own building, you know, ITC did. And, you know, so we helped them with a, you know, clean energy audit, you know, and that's another piece of work I think that, that will be expanding. So I'll leave it there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nick. I wondered whether maybe there was a second part to that question relating, the question is, do you believe that a key to reaching Industry 4.0 in Cambodia is education on energy in both schools and universities? Or do you feel like you answered that question in amongst both the previous answer?
Say it again, that a key to reaching Industry
4.0 is in Cambodia is in education on energy in both schools and universities.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is the thing about this energy transition to me, is like we for many, many years have concentrated on the obvious issues of the environment, you know, environmental protection, guarding against climate change mitigation. But increasingly, because this story has become much more exciting because of this new technology, it's actually about skills. It's actually about jobs, because that's where the future employment is coming from. Because if you move your economy more towards this renewable energy, you've now forced a move towards where all the exciting new technology is getting. That means that companies then are going to start to take on apprentices, new employees, and train them up in that new technology. So you're now starting to have a workforce that has a higher set of skills. And that's a self-perpetuating mechanism, because the more that you have the workforce now has those skills, the more companies want to invest in Cambodia and do more of this kind of work. So you're on a kind of virtuous circle, if you like, moving you in the direction of, so this is also a story to me about jobs with dignity, about careers, about prosperity, you know, as well as this energy transition. So yes, I think it's extremely important for Industry 4.0.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nick. So Bonnie had a question. She asked whether the Royal Government of Cambodia has made any regulation for clean energy or if they are planning to make any regulation in the near future. Butch, would you like to answer that question?
Sure, Bridget, you very well mentioned, and there are a number of policies that many of us have been working towards. There is going to be soon, energy efficiency is one of the key priority area for Royal Government of Cambodia, and trying to actively engage in the buildings energy space, considering the rapid growth the building sector is going through the building technical regulation that includes the energy efficiency code. These are all part of the law of construction, going to be part of the law of construction. The second is on the renewable energy side. The Royal Government has been working very actively towards coming up with a renewable energy development plan, and I'm sure 3I and others have been continuously engaging in coming up with certain kinds of targets for the country. But at the same time, there is a priority given for clean energy, mainly renewable energy, in terms of the national grid, how much proportion it could be. And in a couple of times, you must have heard also, EDC was mentioning up to 15% of the grid share that could be from renewables in moving ahead. So we expect some kind of changes in that direction, hopefully very positive changes. These are not going to lead turning the circle back, but hopefully it will be making some change to start with. Yeah, that's what I could say at this stage. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Butch. It might also be worth mentioning that the government of Cambodia has established a regulation around rooftop solar. So back in 2017, there was no regulation about whether companies or factories could install a system on their roof. And in early 2018, the government established that regulation. It's a regulation that is not quite as positive as the regulation in Vietnam. So in Vietnam, for example, the government gives a very generous price and a fixed amount to purchase excess electricity from the solar system. And it also has a very clear framework for how to go about getting approval and signing the agreements. In Cambodia, the regulation does not allow export of electricity on the grid. It requires only rooftop solar for self-consumption up to 50% of the total connection to the grid. So it's a good step forward, but there is a lot of room to move to encourage investors and factory owners to be able to install solar on their roof. I was wanting to ask if anyone else had any questions on the webinar Q&A session. Otherwise, it is just after 2 o'clock and we can finish up. I just want to make sure that there's no other questions that people would like to ask. And you're welcome, if you want, to put up your hand and I can allow you to talk, or otherwise you can type your questions. Okay. Perfect. Wonderful. Well, then I will take this opportunity to thank everyone for participating and engaging in this webinar. My sincere thanks to Nick Beresford, Country Director for UNDP Cambodia, and Butch Gade from the Senior Policy Advisor at UNDP. for joining us on this webinar and engaging in this fascinating, well, I'm very biased, but I think it's a very fascinating topic and a great opportunity for Cambodia to advance its economy, but also improve its environment at the same time. So with that, I would like to say thank you very much, and I hope to see you again very soon. I have included a questionnaire, and we'd love to get your feedback. This is on the chat, so if you fill it in, then you will actually get a certificate for your participation today. And there is also a magazine, it's called Future of Energy magazine, and it's available now around Phnom Penh. It is available at a few different cafes and organizations across Cambodia. You're welcome to go online to our Facebook page and see where you could get yourself one of those copies. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your participation, and I wish you a fantastic afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bridget.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.